Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the social-heavy, group-focused MMO where classes are interdependent and encounters are challenging and rewarding, is the game we have all been waiting for. It harkens back to the good old days of what MMOs used to be, where deaths were punishing and earning respect in the community meant everything. With millions in funding and a decade of development, the game is looking great and cruising closer to launch. Or is it?
Hey guys, Derek26 here. In this video, we're going to talk about what is going on with Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Pantheon Rise of the Fallen is a crowdfunded MMO that's been in development for 10 years. If you haven't heard, there's been a ton of controversy in recent weeks for both, again, changing up its art style, as well as leaks that the dev team is focusing on a 24/7 extraction/battle royale game mode that they want to monetize for extra funding, leaving many of its longtime backers asking, where's the game and what the heck is going on? So to get the whole picture, let's take a step back in time and take a look at what Pantheon Rise of the Fallen was supposed to be.
Pantheon was the brainchild of Brad McQuaid, the co-founder of Everquest, the granddaddy of all MMORPGs. It was considered by many to be the spiritual successor to Everquest, touting classical MMO mechanics and group-centric gameplay, where exploration was encouraged and gameplay was more organic and emergent. You wouldn't find any quest hubbing or dungeon finders that are common in many current MMOs. It was even stated that there wouldn't be any in-game maps. Players would need to take note of environmental markers to navigate around the world efficiently, very much like they did originally in Everquest and other older games in the genre. Pantheon was announced in January 2014 alongside a Kickstarter campaign. The Kickstarter funding goal was set to a very modest $800K, not even a fraction of the cost of an MMO. But it actually failed to meet the goal, so they unfortunately were not able to receive any of the pledge amount. The Kickstarter is thought to have failed due to the negative popular opinion of Brad McQuaid at the time, given the disastrous launch of another MMO, Vanguard Saga of Heroes, of which he was the producer. The failed Kickstarter did not deter Brad McQuaid, and he set up a website and began crowdfunding Pantheon independently by selling pledged packages. Despite any worry of Brad McQuaid being able to actually get the job done, many gamers did eventually back Pantheon's development with the hope of one day getting an actual next-generation, non-theme park MMO with a strong social focus. A game with a classical feel of something like Everquest, but with much more up-to-date visuals and environmental textures. Brad McQuaid had founded a gaming company named Visionary Realms to undertake the project, and by the next year announced that Chris Perkins was to be promoted to creative director. Pantheon eventually even received investor funding, which sits currently at more than $5 million in addition to the crowdfunding. It seemed that the game was coming along just fine, and the team were given regular process updates and even streaming live gameplay on their Twitch channel. I got to meet Brad McQuaid, Chris Perkins, and others on the team at PAX East in 2018. And even got to play the game with Brad and explore the new dungeon they were showing off called Black Rose Keep. The game felt very familiar. The UI, movement controls, and combat felt very much like Everquest, but the game looked great visually and also ran very smoothly. Brad had stated that back at the studio it was currently all hands on deck for what they called Project Ferel. Ferel was to be the elven home city in-game, surrounded by an adventuring zone for low-level characters. It was to be the first full complete zone that had all of Pantheon's systems and functionality working and available to experience for the upcoming alpha testing. Brad McQuaid had also mentioned that they were probably ready for alpha testing by the end of the year. So far, things were looking up for the game. Unfortunately, Visionary Realms later walked back that claim, saying that they did move their internal goal dates for alpha, but were not yet ready to share the revised alpha target date. Jump forward to 2019, and serious problems started to arise. In October of that year, Pantheon's lead programmer, Daniel Kren, had left the company. And tragically, the next month, Brad McQuaid had passed away. The cause of death hasn't been revealed publicly. Following this tragedy, Visionary Realms vowed to move forward with Brad's vision and continue development of Pantheon to completion. It was announced shortly after that Chris Perkins was promoted to creative and program producer in addition to his current role as creative director. And progress on the game seemed to be continuing to plug along. But then in their October 2020 producer's letter, it was announced that they were taking several steps back. Visionary Realms stated that although all of 2019 and much of 2020 was used for development of Project Ferel, they decided to switch lanes. They were going to stop hard coding all the new features in the client and work to develop a more flexible foundation and pipelines to make further updates quicker and easier to implement. They said that in doing so, quote, systems got torn out and reconstructed in much more efficient and flexible format. Zones were harvested and replanted in expandable gray box format. Even the content such as encounters, storylines, and tasks were recreated in freshly built tools to empower designers. Many backers were obviously skeptical at the time of this news, as the game had already been in production for 6 years, and now was taking a complete about-face in development. 2 years previous to this, backers were told that alpha testing was right around the corner, and now it was nowhere in sight. To their credit, Visionary Realms kept communications open with regular updates, showing slow but steady progress. Over the next few years, Pantheon held several pre-alpha testing sessions showing off and testing the new client. A lot of assets were still gray-boxed, but Visionary Realms said that they were prioritizing features, function, and core loop gameplay over finalized art assets. As the testing and updates carried on, it was apparent that progress was being made slowly, and it began to feel that although it had been a long time in development, there was still a decent amount of hopeful optimism that the game we all hoped for could come to fruition. Then, as possibly another glimmer of hope, the Pantheon's producer letter in July of 2023 said that they were aiming towards a 24/7 testing. The testing servers would be switched over to full-time availability. The letter stated, quote, "This will allow us to gather more data points in terms of peak activity, population, popularity of content areas, and so on in a constant stream of data. It also helps us fortify our networking code, server load, and measure demand. These are all data points we need before we increase the player base and invite more players in." Interesting. Was the game so far along now that they needed around-the-clock testing? Hold that thought a minute. Oddly, the following month, Visionary Realms posted that they had opted to shift their in-game art direction, and were soon to post a video on Pantheon Rise of the Fallen's official YouTube channel explaining what the new art style was and the reason for the changes. The video was only 5 minutes in length, but the news it brought was enormous. After already 10 years in development, Pantheon was changing lanes again and redoing the whole art style of the game. They were moving away from realism to a painted style art for its environment and characters. The reasons given for the change? Basically threefold. They claim the old art style isn't performing as expected and the new art direction would be less taxing on hardware. Also, the new style was supposedly much quicker to implement and would speed up production. But didn't we hear this before? And lastly, Chris Perkins claimed that in all the 10 years of development, they hadn't had the chance to take a step back and ask themselves, what is the look and feel they want for Pantheon? And what is its personal art identity that sets it apart from other MMOs? This change of course, again, was obviously a tough sell to backers who have been waiting, mostly patiently, for a decade now for the highly social-focused game in the spirit of Everquest that had been promised to them. The new art direction, though not bad, just didn't seem to fit with the tone and themes of the game most had hoped for. And worse, the change of direction again, now after 10 years of development, didn't speak well for the current state of the game. But again, some still showed their cautious support. Then came the leak. A user by the name of Deepcoat posted on the forums of MMORPG.com that although Visionary Realms recently announced the 24/7 testing phase of Pantheon, what they didn't reveal is, quote, in fact, not testing an MMO, but a survival MOBA version of Pantheon. And the user goes on that players start in a private instance. They queue for 1-hour survival matches. They have a choice of PvE or PvP when queuing. The players then drop into a random part of the zone in a Hunger Games style scenario with objectives to complete. The same user followed up with a second post that was supposedly a communication to backers from Ben Dean, who's one of the producers and directors of communication of Pantheon. The supposed post by Ben Dean appeared to be in response to rumors that the team was actually trying to monetize the 24/7 testing as a separate game mode. In the response, Ben Dean basically admits that monetizing 24/7 is something that they are looking at. A couple of other shocking details of the post is the admittance that they are in a position where crowdfunding had slowed and there is still a lot of world building and content to create, and that continuing in the current trajectory is not reasonable. Also, for the remainder of this year, 2023, and potentially into next year, 2024, promotions and online content for Pantheon as an MMO will slow as they focus on this 24/7 game mode. Following this, Ben Dean actually did release a statement on the Pantheon official forums, basically admitting that the leaked information regarding the 24/7 game mode and monetization of it was true. More would come in the October Producers Letter. October's Producers Letter confirmed many backers' fears. This new game mode, being called 24/7, is in development, and Visionary Realms indeed aims to monetize it. The Producers Letter came with another video fleshing out more details and showing in-game footage of the new game, or game mode, or whatever it is. You basically spawn into a tower, pick up tasks, teleport into a map, attempt to complete those tasks, and teleport out. And there are PvE and PvP versions. The combat and game mechanics look to be the same old-school, slower-paced combat of more classic MMOs, but now with this more cartoony art style and a newer generation gameplay loop. The movement and animations definitely look clunky, but I'm sure it can look more fluid with continued polish. But the question is, who is the target audience for this game mode? Are longtime backers going to want to play this extraction battle royale type of game? And are new players going to want to play a game sporting, slower-paced, auto-attack-centric gameplay?
So this brings us up to date. 10 years in, millions in funding, and still a game nowhere near alpha, with several setbacks and restarts, a new, fairly cartoony art style, and a game mode that no one has asked for. So where does this leave us? Here is my honest take. I'm someone who's a huge fan of MMOs of all types. I really feel that in the current MMO landscape, there's really a wide open niche for a more sandboxy, group-based MMO that's challenging and doesn't hold your hand. I started my MMO career way back with Everquest and did hardcore raiding and raid leading, and I loved every minute of it. I would love to experience the essence of that same kind of game again, and I'm sure many of you would as well. But I have to say, after following this game for over a decade, it is not looking so good. Again, I don't have any ill will towards the team. I really do hope that they can pull this off. But just even looking at their latest alpha roadmap that was updated last before this total art redo, they were really far off from an alpha test even then. And now that funding has supposedly dried up, well, I don't think these latest controversies are going to bring in new funding, unfortunately. And it's sad to see. I would love to see this game make it to launch and be the game that we all hoped it can be. But what are your guys' thoughts? Do you think that Pantheon still has a chance? Do you think that they'll release anything even? Post your comments below. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up for the algorithm. And don't forget to subscribe for more MMO content. Also, let me know if you'd like to see me continuing to cover this topic. Okay guys, I will see you in the next one.